Hopefully it's gonna disappear.
Hopefully.
Continue on Russell Road for half a mile.
Oh, they want us to take 390.
University Chicago,
Make
ranked by
fun.
U.S. News among the top universities in the nation, where students discover their path to a lifelong calling. Learn
I
more
forgot about
all
390.
the programs at wc.edu. As she turns 70 and publishes her 20th book, Anne Lamott still finds writing just hard.
I mean, the American way, you should always know what you're doing. You've made a decision, you should stick with it. No writer who never had or read knows what they're doing until they've done it.
Best-selling author Anne Lamott. That's next time on the 10 Rated Hour from NPR. This afternoon at 1 o'clock on WBEZ.
In a quarter mile, turn right onto the Illinois 390 East ramp.
You can never not miss this house here.
Yep.
Turn right onto the Illinois 390 East ramp. In a quarter mile, merge onto Illinois 390.
I don't think I ever took this entrance.
Really? Off of Roselle Road?
Never.
How about from Meacham?
Yeah, I think so. It's so hot.
You could just turn the it's on code. It's on maximum code now.
In 1.5 miles, use the right 2 lanes to take the exit toward I-290 East.
Yeah, I don't have to do anything anymore.
No, we know where we're going now.
Still showing 55, so that means.
I mean, you could just keep it on just to keep a track of
In
all the
1.5
traffic.
miles, use the right 2 lanes to take the exit toward I-290 East.
I'm just gonna shut her up. You know?
Okay.
You're on the fastest
Unusually
road
heavy
despite
traffic.
unusually heavy traffic.
Do you know what Jimmy said yesterday?
Yeah.
Because he asked me, he said, where you going? I said, I'm going to the city. He said, but this is the city. I'm like, I don't consider this a city. This is the suburbs of Chicago. He says, well, technically this is like people call the city also. But this is the outskirts of the city. And then he's saying, do you know which areas separate Chicago from the suburbs? I said, I don't know. He said Harlem.
Yeah, Norwich.
He said
In half a
Harlem
mile,
separates.
use the right 2 lanes to take the exit toward I-290 East.
Yeah, when you look at it, Norwich is on Harlem. It's the first kind of like suburb, you know, like a suburb. From this side.
Use the right 2 lanes to take the exit toward I-290 East.
Why this one is talking? I thought I said not to talk.
Stop talking.
Muted. It's beautiful today.
Turn out nice.
I would actually like to go to the lake. Yeah, just to walk a little bit, you know.
You charging your phone? I don't know what happened to the other cable we had here. Is there one on the floor?
else's garbage that was picked up. Looks like it.
How long does it take for a package to be delivered with UPS?
UPS?
I never really looked at the tracking of it to see how long it really takes for delivery.
Friday or Monday, next Monday.
It takes a week, you think?
I would say with the ground. They're not in a hurry with the ground. So probably
That's why
5,
it's so
6
cheap.
days. Which is great. I mean, she doesn't know that she's getting it, so she's
No,
not.
I'm not gonna say nothing.
Yeah.
She gets it, she'll
until-
get it.
Yeah.
Well, let me get out of this lane because this is a fast lane.
There will not be any fast lanes today. backed up first here and then the other place because there's accident. Well, normally it's really okay, you know. It's like
Sunday
40
is
minutes,
nice.
Yeah.
When we went down last Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
it was pretty good.
You know what I would like to have? A little studio. Somewhere, you know, in a nice place.
Yeah.
And then a nice bed. So you have a little studio in case if you wanna stay, you know. Yeah, it's gonna already start.
Yeah. Look at this truck right here.
Very strange the way you put this square.
That's what, dishwasher?
I don't know.
It looked like one.
Across all 3 grades, no one trusts each other. Everyone's sort of looking at each other's things that they're building, and the teachers are picking up on it too. I'm sort of watching everyone's spaceships, being like, I don't remember that orange one and that green one and the blue one in the 2nd grade of 2A. That's not. I don't know if that's true. And I'm sort of getting there too, but we're all kind of watching each other, and then I am getting homework. Edward does his homework and does more homework than he needs to, but he always forgets to hand it in. And so I just randomly, I go into his cubby just to grab the math homework that I know is in there. Under the math homework is a jewel-encrusted spaceship. Dazzling. The wings have wings, and those wings have other things, and there's a glass window that I have literally never seen before. In the 6 years that I've been teaching there, I've never seen this glass window. It's beautiful, but I'm stuck with a dilemma. What do I do with this? If I accuse him, then number one, the 2nd graders are kind of intense, and I'm a little worried about what they would do. Number two, I already told the 2nd graders it couldn't have possibly been my boys. This is my reputation on the line as well. I don't want it to have been him. I could, it occurs to me, just steal it back. I could just take it. Because if he tried to say someone stole my jewel-encrusted spaceship, that would be on him. That would be his, that's a dilemma he would have. But then I realized that could possibly be framing another kid, and I have my line. I will not cross. So I'm not going to frame a kid. So instead, I wait for a Friday when we should be taking apart our things, and he has not been taking apart the spaceship. And I wait till Friday, I get him alone, and I say to him really casually, so don't forget to take apart your spaceship. And he looks at me, and he knows I know. and he says something really ballsy. He goes, I did. I already did. I sit down with him. I open the cubby. I show him the spaceship. And I say, this is an amazing spaceship. You did a really great job. But you gotta let it go. And we cut a deal. And over the course of several weeks, we dismantled the spaceship very, very slowly. I can't just smash it. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not gonna just take the whole thing apart. And I start secretly putting those jewels back in other people's cubbies for him, so that he can still be the head of the Black Hole Boys and not lose that reputation that he has, that he loves, and so that I don't have to, go back on my word that my boys didn't do anything. I was an accessory to a third-grade crime. That there's no way around that. That's it. Thank you.
Nothing about this bothering me. At 4, Occam's toilet. Like I said earlier in our show, we had a mom who invented an entire courtroom to teach her kids some lessons and some values. In this act, we have parents doing something so much simpler. They're simply trying to level with their kids and reason with them together. And in this case, they recorded what happened. We've actually changed everybody's names at the kids' request. Heather Hopkins tells the story.
Todd and Amy live in a house in New Jersey. It's an old house. And one day, they notice they've got a plumbing problem. There's liquid pooling in this hole in their basement floor around a sewage pipe. They call a plumber, who snakes the drain and charges them $500. And then, a few weeks later, the liquid reappears. A second plumber comes in. He can't find any other problems with their sewage system. His professional opinion is that there isn't anything wrong with their sewage system. He thinks what's going on is much simpler. The liquid in the hole is actually pee. Someone in their house is peeing in the hole. Quick warning I have to make because we're on the radio. Peeing comes up a bunch of times in the story. Nothing gross, but just so you know. What the plumber suggested seemed entirely possible. Amy and Todd have 3 boys, 8-year-old twins, Ryan and Lawrence, and their younger brother, Hugh, who's 6. And so, they gather the kids together to find out who peed in the hole. Amy, their mom, records a video of the meeting on her phone.
So, we had the plumber come again, and 2 times in just over 3 weeks, dirty, backed up in the basement, like pee. Now,
That's Ryan, twin number 1. They're all sitting on a navy blue sectional. Todd keeps calmly laying out the facts. Yes, they think there's pee on the basement floor.
yeah, like in that little recess, in that little hole. So,
The one who just said, not me, that's Hugh, the little one. Lawrence, twin number 2, hasn't said anything yet. He's quiet, with a blank expression on his face. Then Ryan asks a question.
yes.
He wants to know if it's possible that the dog did it.
So, it is entirely possible. My question then to you is, have any of you ever gone and just peed in that hole in the basement? You swear.
Oh my God.
What is it?
20 minutes it became, instead of 13, became now 20-minute delay.
Right up ahead of us? Right?
So
Yep.
now, all 3
We
children
were already
have denied
30 something,
peeing
now
in
it's
the hole.
42.
Their dad tries to
Fuck.
explain to the kids, someone peeing in the hole is actually the best possible scenario.
It would not be good, and I would not
Is it
be
accident?
but it would be preferable that if someone is doing this, that you're honest.
Tanya Mosley with Fresh Air. Terry Gross and I are so glad to be on WBEZ at 1 o'clock, right after reset. Listen for Fresh Air Mondays through Thursdays at 1 here on 91.5 WBEZ Chicago.
Thanks for tuning in to This American Life on WBEZ. Come back later for True Stories Told Live. 2 hours of the Moth Radio Hour starts at 5 o'clock here on 91.5 WBEZ.
Thanks for joining us on 91.5 WBEZ. Weather for tonight could see some rain late with lows in the mid-30s, followed by showers and thunderstorms Sunday afternoon and a high near 56. This is WBEZ.
This is WBEZ HD Chicago, 91.5 FM. WBEQ HD Morris, 90.7 FM. WBEK Kankakee, 91.1 FM. W219 CD Elgin, and on the WBEZ
I told you there was a
app.
wire there. I just didn't know where it went.
Is the TED Radio Hour. Each week, groundbreaking
Yes.
TED Talks
Our job now is to dream big.
delivered at TED conferences
To bring about the future we want to see.
around the world.
To understand who we are.
From those talks, we bring you speakers and ideas that will surprise you,
You just don't know what you're gonna find.
challenge you,
We truly have to ask ourselves, like, why is it noteworthy?
and even change you.
I literally feel like I'm a different person.
Yes.
Do you feel that way?
Ideas worth spreading. From TED and NPR. I'm Manoush Zamarodi. Coming up.
It can be scary to make that your priority and your deepest value, that you be a person who loves recklessly and who allows people to love her.
On the show today, best-selling author Anne Lamott. First, this news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Nora Rahm. Hamas says it will send a delegation to Egypt tomorrow for ceasefire talks set to resume this weekend. Tomorrow marks the 6-month milestone in the war between Israel and Hamas. NPR's Carrie Kahn reports.
Hamas says it accepted an invitation from Egypt to the talks, but will not concede on its demand for an end to Israeli aggression. Talks have dragged on for months. Negotiators are pressing for a 6-week ceasefire, along with an exchange of Palestinians held in Israeli jails for about half of the nearly 100 Israeli hostages still held in Gaza. The Israeli military said the body of one hostage was retrieved Friday night during a raid by troops in central Gaza. A senior military official said the body of 47-year-old Elad Ketzer was dug up and returned to Israel. Saturday, Gaza's health ministry raised the death toll in the war to more than 33,000. The UN's humanitarian coordinator called the situation catastrophic. Oxfam says Palestinians in northern Gaza are surviving on less than 300 calories of food a day. Carrie Kahn, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
China and the U.S. have agreed to launch a new dialogue that will focus on balanced economic growth. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says she'll advocate for a level playing field for American firms and workers. NPR's John Ruich has more.
Yellen is visiting China, where she wrapped up 2 days of talks with Vice Premier He Lifeng. In a statement, Yellen said the two sides agreed to hold intensive exchanges on balanced growth, which she said would facilitate a discussion around macroeconomic imbalances, including industrial overcapacity. Yellen said she's particularly concerned about the impact that Chinese manufacturing overcapacity, resulting from government support, could have on the American economy. The two sides also agreed to start an exchange on the issue of anti-money laundering in order to expand cooperation against illicit finance and financial crime. John Ruich, NPR News, Beijing.
House Republicans' long-awaited impeachment trial against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas is set to begin next week when Congress returns from an extended recess. NPR's Claudia Grisales reports.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said he expects the trial against Secretary Mayorkas to begin Thursday, the day after the chamber is expected to receive the articles of impeachment. The move comes after the Republican-controlled House impeached Mayorkas in February. However, GOP Speaker Mike Johnson delayed the transmittal of the articles to the Senate until after Congress settled budget plans for the current fiscal year. While Schumer has been tight-lipped on the next steps, many expect the Republican impeachment effort against Mayorkas to die in the Senate with a quick trial. Claudia Grisales, NPR News.
This is NPR News. The Miami Nation of Oklahoma has been working with Miami University in Ohio for several decades to revitalize the tribe's nearly lost language. Monday's total solar eclipse got researchers thinking about how their ancestors talked about eclipses. Tana Weingartner of member
sure you don't
station
look at it.
WVXU reports.
Christina Fox is a
That's what they
citizen
keep
of the
saying.
Miami or
They said
Miami
you can-
tribe
you
of
can use a cereal
Oklahoma.
box.
She says a language analysis
That's what they
found
were
her
saying on
ancestors
some
thought about
stupid
eclipses as a
radio
rebirth
show.
of the sun
Don't
and
even
moon,
look at it.
using language
It
to
can
how
damage
they
your
talked
eyes
about
Yeah.
lunar
in a
cycles.
second.
We actually would call a solar eclipse Wase Kilswane Pike,
The best
which
place
is
he was
referring to
talking
the
about
sun
in Texas.
dying. But
People
we
were
always
renting
know
out
it's
their
going to come back.
homes.
She says eclipses were viewed as powerful moments of transition to be marked by shouting and shooting with bows or guns into the sky to encourage the rebirth. Miami University draws its name from the Miami Nation and is home to the tribe's Miami Center for Education and Research. For NPR News, I'm Tana Weingartner. In a presidential
They say
fundraising report
the
out
strainer,
today,
the metal
the
strainer.
Democratic
Look through
National
that.
Committee and the Biden administration
It was a stupid program talking about it in the morning. I'm
on the
like, where did
Republican
he get this
side, the
information
Trump
from?
campaign and the RNC picked up $66 million in that period. Trump is holding a fundraiser tonight at the Palm Beach, Florida home of a billionaire investor. His supporters hope to raise more than $40 million. The price of a ticket at the head table is more than $800,000. I'm Nora
To use
Rahm,
that to look through.
NPR News in Washington.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indiana University, committed to moving the world forward and working to tackle some of society's biggest challenges. 9 campuses, 1 purpose, creating tomorrow today. More at iu.edu.
The Chicago Showdown continues this week with our core 4 contenders. Tavern-style pizza faces a Chicago dog in our final food matchup, and Lakeviews face off against the L. Only one icon will win and become the best of Chicago. Join the madness and help your favorite win ultimate bragging rights. Cast your bracket vote today to determine our final matchup at wbez.org/showdown.
It's the TED Radio Hour from NPR. I'm Manusha Zamarodi.
In Northern California in the 50s and early 60s, all 4th graders had to write their first research paper. And you have a whole semester to do it. One semester was about Sacramento, our capital, and one semester was about birds.
This is best-selling author Anne Lamott.
So my older brother, who did not like school and was very bitter about any homework he was asked to do, had not started it. He'd had the whole semester, and it was due that Monday. So we were out at this one-room cabin we had on the coast, and my dad was trying to help him, and they had photos of birds. They had the National Geographic, they had Roger Tory Peterson and Audubon, but my brother was crying because it was just such a daunting project. And my dad sat down next to him and put his arm around him and said, just take it bird by bird, buddy.
Even though Anne was just 9 years old at the time, her father's words stuck with her.
That was the best writing advice I've ever heard, that you study about chickadees and then you write about them for a little bit in your own voice. Then you illustrate them. Then you think about great blue herons and you read what Audubon has to say, and then you put it in your own words.
And you've really turned that into a metaphor for starting so many things in our lives.
Everything. I mean, the American way is that you should always know what you're doing. You've made a decision and you should stick with it. But the fact is that no writer knows what they're doing until they've done it. The way that you get to that, to the miracle of writing, is bird by bird.
If you know Anne Lamott, you've heard this story before. If you don't, it's a great introduction to her, because that phrase, bird by bird, is also the title of one of her best-known books. Anne is now the author of 20 books, mostly filled with her own memories of family, single parenting, addiction, faith, and forgiveness. For over 40 years, her work has touched a nerve with so many people who turn to her for wisdom and advice on how to write, but also how to live. And so today on the show, An hour with Anne Lamott as she marks her 70th birthday. Lessons from her life and more reflections on the art of writing. Her newest book is called Somehow, Thoughts on Love. But first, we need to go back to Bird by Bird, her bestseller that came out about 30 years ago. On the very first page, she begins with a description of her earliest memories.
For a while.
Who?
I grew up around a father and mother who read every chance they got, who took us to the library every Thursday night to load up on books for the coming week. Most nights after dinner, my father stretched out on the couch to read, while my mother sat with her book in the easy chair, and the three of us kids each retired to our own private reading stations. Our house was very quiet after dinner, unless that is some of my father's writer friends were over. My father was a writer, as were most of the men with whom we hung out. They were not the quietest people on earth, but they were mostly very masculine and kind. I loved them, but every so often one of them would pass out at the dinner table. I was an anxious child to begin with, and I found this unnerving.
I love this because it's such a California scene in some ways, but it's also, you know, you say you were anxious. You were an anxious child to begin with. How did that manifest itself? What were you like?
Well, first of all, my parents were very, very unhappy together, and so I was on red alert a lot of the time because I didn't want to walk into any traps. I had migraines by the time I was 5, so I think that would indicate that there was an issue. And then not long after, my mom had my baby brother, and I just felt really positive that I had to help raise him because my parents were
there was no AC?
so preoccupied.
It was just nothing.
Oh, Jesus.
It was turned off.
Out of their league.
You thought the AC was
on?
Yeah, I was like, why is it so hot? My
was a writer,
cheeks
so
are
he was trying to
burning.
keep the family together financially. There was so much going on, so I took on raising the baby brother at 5 years and 40 pounds or whatever, and that did not reduce my anxiety.
You worried about him a lot.
I worried about him a lot. I thought about him dying all the time because people weren't paying attention, and I had terrible dreams of him drowning. I mean, I can still vividly remember a dream, and I think I'm 6 or 7, and I can remember the details of the trees of this dream I dreamt when my younger brother was just a little one.
Do you remember when you started to realize that the observation, the vividness of dreams, the remembering of small details, that they were all fodder for writing? Was that from the beginning just because of your dad encouraging you to do that? Or was there a moment where you're like, oh, look at me, I'm actually really good at this?
That's a good question. I think it really molded me into a person who had a lot of fear about whether or not the world was even safe. The world never felt safe to me from kindergarten on because I got bullied so much, and I responded by getting a sense of humor. I did discover that the best way to fight back was to come up with the right retort. And then I went to college when I was 17 and dropped out when I was 19 at the end of my sophomore year. And I was writing little pieces for the college paper. I went to Goucher College in Maryland, and I just wrote about being young women at this feminist college coming into our own, and they were pretty funny. And so, you know, I understood that if I wrote this way, people liked it.
You got a book deal in your early 20s, right? Your first one?
For Hard Laughter, my first novel.
And that was about your father's death. And I think what strikes people also so much about your writing is how shockingly honest you are about your life. Did you feel like this is just me on the page?
You
were
mean
you
the
writing
book sale?
for the reader, or were you writing for yourself?
Well, my father got sick with a metastasized melanoma in his brain when I was 23, and he was still the center of our family. My brothers and I just adored him. He was like our higher power. And he got sick, and he wasn't going to live. And I went to the library, and I looked everywhere and talked to the research librarians for books about families coming through cancer, and it just wasn't there. This is 1977. You didn't say the word cancer. That's why in Hard Laughter, my dad and our really dear friend Susan liked to sit around at the cafe in Bolinas, and they'd say the word cancer really loudly to each other to make people uncomfortable. Dad would say, well, Susan, how was your cancer today? She'd say, well, Ken, my cancer is not as bad as I think it was just last week. How was your cancer? And so I started writing a book that might be helpful to people in whose family was somebody with a really significant kind of cancer. And people, the book it's sold 35 copies in hardback. It wasn't a big seller, but people came up to me. I got the kind of feedback that made me think, wow, when I tell these stories that you're not supposed to say out loud, it's a gift to people who are going through that same sort of thing.
Can we talk about your literal process of writing? There's a passage again in Bird by Bird that I'd be so grateful if you read for us.
2 stars.
It's on page
2 stars?
1 5-star.
Oh, okay. At least you got one.
This is how it works for
Rub
me.
the hint.
I sit down in the morning and reread the work I did the day before. And then I wool gather, staring at the blank
Step into the
page
shoes
off
of
into
Derek Bingham,
space.
a regular tech worker who dared to dream, tired of 9-to-5 grind and eager for more than just a paycheck. Derek took a leap of faith. He plunged into the exciting world of high-ticket affiliate marketing, and his life changed
the
forever.
menial work of getting it down on
Look at the
paper
review.
because I'm the designated typist. And I'm also the person whose job it is to hold the lantern while the kid does the digging. What is the kid digging for? The stuff. Details and clues and images, invention, fresh ideas, and intuitive understanding of people. I tell you, the holder of the lantern doesn't even know what the kid is digging for half the time.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, very detailed, easy to understand system.
Is that still your process? Would you say?
She's a verified purchaser.
I just read a piece
A Viper system is a must-have for anyone wanting to learn more about affiliate marketing.
An idea,
whatever you're exploring the options,
and I stare off into space, and then some words start
very,
bouncing around,
they wrote
and then
it like,
I just keep doing this
come on,
paragraph
who
by
writes that?
paragraph, and I dig around, and then all of a sudden I might, on a good day, have an insight about humankind, and then I think of a funny little story that just happened that I want to remember. And
sounds like his girlfriend.
I always have paper with me, and I always have a pen, and almost all of my jeans have little dots of ink in the back pocket, and you just have to live with that.
There was a point where people started asking you for advice about how to write, and that is the book, Bird by Bird. I'd like to play, actually, some of the advice that you put into that book that you also shared in your TED Talk about the act of writing.
If you don't know where to start, remember that every single thing that happened to you is yours, and you get to tell it. If people wanted you to write more warmly about them, they should have behaved better. You're going to feel like hell if you wake up someday and you never wrote the stuff that is tugging on the sleeves of your heart. Your stories, memories, visions, and songs. Your truth, your version of things, in your own voice. That's really all you have to offer us. Publication and temporary creative successes are something you have to recover from. They kill as many
April 16th.
Image and change you in ways you cannot imagine. The most degraded and evil people I've ever known are male writers who've had huge bestsellers. And yet, it's also a miracle to get your work published, to get your stories read and heard. Just try to bust yourself gently of the fantasy that publication will heal you, that it will fill the Swiss cheesy holes inside of you. It can't. It won't. But writing can. So can singing in a choir or a bluegrass band. So can painting community murals or birding or fostering old dogs that no one else will. It really is like monk's work. You sit down in a little cell, turn off the outside world, go deeply inside, and you do your work. No one's making you write. No one cares if you write.
It's not that great one review from your friend after such a long time.
Her life's work, her writings,
How great is the book? book if you only get one review.
I'm Anusha Zamarani, and you're listening to the TED Radio Hour from NPR. Stay with us.
That one review, like, how many has he actually sold?
No, that one is verified purchase, but you know, he could have bought it himself. You know, if you had something, I would have been buying for you and writing reviews.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what we do.
But there would be more than one in my case, you know, because I would ask my daughter, I would ask my, you know, I would make at least, I mean, for him to have just one all this time, that's really not that great. That means even his friends don't want to spend $20.
Oh, it's $20?
In 19 something.
$19.95.
Yeah. You know, because I would at least invest $300 and have at least 15 people buy it and write a review. You know what I'm saying? That's an investment. If he's so smart, she should have known that you invest and have people write reviews, so you have multiple reviews. Even if you invest $1,000, that's, you know, and let
he has to have those reviews. People look at that. Even when I buy stuff, if I look at a buyer, I mean a seller that doesn't have any reviews, I try to find somebody else that has a review.
Come on, Dad. Cannot even advise yourself.
Helping NPR advance journalistic excellence in the digital age.
It's the TED Radio Hour from NPR. I'm Anusha Zamarani, and we're spending this hour with the very wise and very funny best-selling author and TED speaker, Anne Lamott. Anne's 20th book is called Somehow, Thoughts on Love. It's full of essays about the various shapes that love
They
can
cleaned
take.
up a little bit.
That day was horrible on the side here.
But here they cleaned up on the other side. All those bags are garbage bags.
I'm cleaning it up, yeah.
I'm so glad to be here.
It doesn't look so bad.
You have written extensively
But this side is
about
difficult.
your experience
See, like
with
there's no garbage.
addiction, about learning to forgive yourself, to care for yourself. For people who maybe haven't read along,
Yeah, they're cleaning up the
tell us about when and how that started, your addiction, and when it started to heal.
Because there's so much freaking
I
garbage.
think I just came this way, you know?
Somebody has to clean
I
it.
think I just had and have a very addictive
I know in some states they
personality.
have inmates
I
do
can
it.
remember
Yeah,
being on
they
rope
should.
swings with my girlfriends when I
Okay,
was really young.
It's free labor right there.
Spinning around, and the girls would stop before they got dizzy, and I would want to keep going, and I would love to get off that rope swing and then stagger around drunkenly. And then, as I said, I was shy and I was very bullied, and I remember the first time I chugged a beer with my best friend, Lisa Campmeyer, and she'd gotten a couple beers out of her father's little fridge in the man cave, and we chugged them, and the whole world sprang into color, like in The Wizard of Oz, when Dorothy opens the door into Oz, and I could breathe again, and I felt pretty, and I felt happy, and I was so much less self-conscious, and I just felt like, let me at it, you know, and I sort of, for the rest of my life, the next 20 years, I just chased down that feeling of feeling pretty and whole and fully alive. And of course, it's kind of a cliche, but what happens is there's three parts. There's the really fun stage of alcoholism or addiction, and it's just a gas, you know. And then there's the fun and trouble stage where it's happening too often and you're sick in the mornings and you're embarrassing yourself or making people mad at you or making bigger and bigger mistakes. And then there's the trouble stage and you're waking up pretty consistently really sick and confused, or I would wake up in this animal disorientation of where am I? Why did I do that? What did I do? Having to call around to people to see how the night before had gone. But I didn't let that stop me for a long time, and then finally, July 7th, 1986, I woke up and I just had this feeling. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I reached out to a sober friend I knew, an older man, and I said, I think I'm done.
Did it surprise you? Did you surprise yourself?
No, I was an alcoholic since my early 20s.
You can do anything
You
you
know, everyone in my family drinks, both my brothers were alcoholics. All three of us have 37 plus years clean and sober. My dad drank a lot, all of our family friends, and so it was fine. It was like, it just meant that you were sort of a bon vivant. And we laughed about the hangovers, and we laughed about
hope there will be spots open and we don't have to,
So she's not holding the spot for us?
She did move, but, if we can stop outside and not have her come down, it will be better.
What it's doing to your soul.
I just want to make sure that we have something in case.
Thoughts on Love. You write about what a man who was also in recovery told you.
Sometimes we look out.
Would you mind reading that passage for us?
Yeah.
When I first got sober, a man told me that upon waking every morning, instead of reciting the standard flowery recovery prayer, he said, whatever. And at night, when he turned off his light to go to sleep, he said, oh well. In between, he practiced simplicity. He stayed sober, worked on acceptance, tried to be of service to others, went for nature walks, picked up litter, made himself tea, and called it a day. This is a perfect plan for living. My way, trying to nudge life and people into submission with my sensitivity and excellent ideas leaves me exhausted. The antidote is to surrender, lay down my sorry weapons and step over to the winning side of friends, service, and fresh air. I open the windows. I savor the fresh air whenever I remember to open them. The fresh air breathes the whole house.
Tell me about this philosophy. Is it like the thing where you're trying so hard to get that job of your dreams, and the minute you stop caring, that's when you get the offer? That kind of thing?
Well, it's not when you stop caring, because that might not ever happen, but for me, it's when I unclench my grip on it, and when I start to release, and I start to breathe again, and I just have faith that whatever is supposed to happen is going to happen, because it's the only thing that can happen a lot of the time. It's when I release it and stop, breathing my hot breath down its neck that I often get what I had hoped for.
Do you think that that's very American as well? This idea that you just barrel through, and if you just knuckle down and want it hard enough and work hard enough, you can get whatever you want.
Oh, definitely. That's how I was raised. I call it forward thrust. Is that you must always be advancing and on the path of success. In fact, I've written a lot about how part of the reason our parents taught us that way of life was because it would keep you from falling in the abyss, which might otherwise open up at your feet. Now, the abyss is where almost everything I've learned that's really, really important about myself and about life has been found. But everything in my family was about pretending there is no abyss, and that you just have to walk fast enough and you'll be able to outrun it. And so with my students, with my son, with my grandson, I really encourage people to notice the forward thrust, and that it really didn't serve them. Maybe it got them into the school they wanted to get into, but now they've got the rest of their lives to live, and how are they going to live those precious, precious years? And it starts to occur to you that it never really worked, the forward thrust, that it didn't fill you up, and B, it really hurt you and a lot of people along the way.
Can we turn the conversation to God, please? Because you are a devout Christian, you often write about your belief, you are a Sunday school teacher, but you did not grow up that way. How did faith enter your life?
Oh, well, that's a great question. I love it. My parents were devout atheists, but they were also devout liberal activists, and I end up being a believer who's also a devout activist. So I don't want your listeners to get the idea that I'm like the stereotype of a Christian in America. It's like Gandhi said, I love Christ, but I just am worried about the Christians, and I feel exactly the same way. But I always believed. It's funny because I just had this thirst inside of me. And because I was such a frightened child and an insomnia and had these migraines, when I got in bed, I somehow knew, don't ask me how, that if I said in silence,
This is car.
hello, something
it?
No signal.
Just
and I
from this
wasn't
side
alone.
to just.
When
Look,
I was in
look.
college, I took a
Look,
lot
no
of
signal again.
and I took a lot of philosophy.
What the fuck is this
and I
person?
can remember
What
the
is
day,
wrong
and I've
with
written
you?
about it when
Wow,
I made
some
the
Indian
decision
dude.
to be a seeker, to be a person who tried to find.
Cut right in front of me, no
a
signal,
safe
and then go
place.
all the way to
When I
the
was
no
18
signal.
years old, I just started my sophomore year.
It's very
and we
easy
were
to just
reading
draw on your signal and let people know what you're doing real
philosophy
quick.
Class, Fear and Trembling. And it's such a wild piece of writing because it's about
4 kids.
like the least lovely piece of the whole Bible when God tells Abraham to take Isaac, his precious young boy, up to the mountain and sacrifice him. And he goes up there, and of course the angels meet him and say, well, God has provided a lamb in the thicket, and Abraham goes back home to Isaac. But the teacher talked about the leap of faith that Abraham made in that moment, that he decides for faith instead of what he is positive would be the right and just thing to do. And I made the leap of faith that day. It's very mysterious to me, but I understood in that moment how bleak and scary and dreary life was going to be if I just didn't find something to connect to that was bigger than my own rattled pinball brain. And that was when my search began. I studied everything I could, and I found this kind of consignment store faith that was very, very ecumenical. But I don't. I prayed all the time. I just
you'll have like a tour, and you
get to
can
be
just
here, and that I'm a person of
whenever you
value,
want to
whether
stop,
or not
you
the
can
world or
stop
the current boyfriend saw me that way, and that I prayed for peace, and I didn't become a Christian. I mean, I really resisted it. I really resisted it. And then one day I just surrendered, I was drunk.
You were drunk?
Yeah. It was the year before I got sober. It was 1985. And I had been staggering over to this flea market on Sunday mornings when I was at my most hungover. And I had staggered into this crummy little church with a Charlie Brown tree outside. And I was hearing some of the old songs of the civil rights movement that my parents had been very involved in, that were also gospel songs from the Deep South. And I never stayed for the Jesus-y parts, the sermon, but I loved the singing. And the people never hassled me or tried to get me to sign on to Bible study or try to figure out who shot the Holy Ghost. They just could see that I was in pretty desperate straits, and they got me tea, and they gave me hugs, and I left, and then I stopped leaving, and then I stayed.
When did you decide to come out as a religious person? I wondered if you worried about that and whether you've ever felt the need to censor yourself for, you appeal to a progressive liberal audience, which is generally not religious.
A lot of people, though, in my audience are people who ran screaming from their cute little lives as children in fundamentalist Christian families who didn't think that there could be a place in the greater body for someone like them who was maybe gay or who was just a free spirit and who didn't buy the doctrine and didn't buy the harshness of fundamentalist Christianity. But so I got sober, and then I started writing a book that ended up being called Operating Instructions, a journal of my son's first year, and that was when I overtly came out as a believer and someone who went to church and prayed and did the work.
In your TED Talk, you talk about faith.
Yeah, I always like to know what's the part.
To me, as someone who did not grow up with any religion, and I find it very moving, so let's listen.
Grace is spiritual WD-40, or water wings. The mystery of grace is that God loves Henry Kissinger and Vladimir Putin and me exactly as much as he or she loves your new grandchild. Go figure. The movement of grace is what changes us, and heals our world. To summon grace, say, help, and then buckle up. Grace finds you exactly where you are, but it doesn't leave you where it found you. And grace won't look like Casper the Friendly Ghost, regrettably.
You wanted to go there?
It's so cute.
They've been there before?
About yourself back.
They live right
Laughter really is carbonated holiness.
I'm afraid that we're not going to see
it. Helps us breathe again and again.
Here it
gets
is.
us back to ourselves.
The truth.
And this gives us faith in life and each other.
Oh, yes.
Oh, somebody just parked.
What?
Yep.
No.
Yep.
Always battle last.
If only if I was there a
God
few
just means goodness.
One
It's really not
one
all
minute
that
early.
scary. It means the
made the turn. We
divine,
just
our
made the
loving,
turn.
animating intelligence.
Oh my God.
Or as we learned from
get out of
the
there.
great deteriorata, the cosmic muffin. A good name for God is not me. Emerson said that the happiest person on earth is the one who learns from
Baby, I'm
nature
here.
the
We
lessons
don't
of
have a
worship.
spot. I see Srinivas. Is it Srinivas?
Yeah, that's him.
Coming in? Okay, we're gonna follow him. Follow him. Yeah, we're gonna
It's
follow.
the reset
Okay.
button.
Okay,
Get
follow.
outside, you look up, and it starts.
Oh my
everything
gosh,
over
what?
again.
This person, I didn't know what they were doing.
Years
Well, you know,
after you got sober.
Well, I don't know what they
Okay,
were doing.
we are
Your son
in.
Sam, he's now in his 30s.
Okay.
At the time, you were unmarried, and you know the biological father didn't want to have any part of it. But you decided to go forward as a
think he's
single
backing up
mother,
a little.
and you turned the experience that first year as a single mother into the book Operating Instructions. This book means a lot to me because when I had my first child, I was looking for a book, just like you were looking for the book about cancer that told the truth. I was looking for a book about parenting and what it was really like, and there was really, at the time, not that much.
There's a line in the book that said, "Oh God, now he's raised his ugly reptilian head," and no mother had ever said that before. And there's a line in the book about casually thinking about bundling him up really well and putting him in a basket outside for the night, so I could get one night's sleep and get a second wind. And